Anyways, welcome to the High Contrast Podcast. Will, how you doing?
I'm all right, Eric. How you doing?
I'm doing.
Is that
I'm
two dunes?
I'm doing okay. But how is Dune? It's doing okay. It was nominated for 5 Academy Awards.
Uh-huh.
And they're weird. And I think they reflect how I feel about the movie after having rewatched it. Uh,
Hmm.
so one of them is Best Picture. Okay,
For Dune
great.
2?
Yep.
Okay.
Dune Part 2. Yeah. And then the rest are
Whatever.
just
Yeah.
visual effects, sound, production design, and cinematography.
I can totally see that.
It's like, oh, this movie's one of the greatest movies of the years because of all the technical qualities. Writing, directing, acting performances, zero nominations.
Hmm. Do you think that's because of anything like diminished about those qualities and that maybe the Academy didn't recognize those, or that they just felt that there were better ones and that the potentials were so good elsewhere that they had to leave out Dune?
Well, I don't know about this, but the guy that I do the This Week at the Movies podcast with his theory is that they're looking at it like a Lord of the Rings treatment. There's a setup for Dune Messiah, and
Hmm.
they're nodding towards the movie, but they're giving other movies credit where they're going to shower Dune Messiah as an achievement of a three-part series that is like combined into one, giving it the Return of the King treatment.
Hmm.
Um, that depends on if Dune Messiah is good. So I don't know how I feel. There's a lot about this, but my opinion on the two Dune movies has shifted kind of radically since the time we talked about Dune Part 1. And I'm not sure how that's going to land like permanently forevermore, but the reason I wanted to come back and talk about this is when we talked about Dune Part 1, we mentioned how the reviews for that were kind of scattered, anywhere from the C to an A range. Like people didn't really necessarily know what to make of it. And I was curious if it had found its audience in the years since then and what would happen with Dune Part 2. And I think we're going to see the universal acclaim that comes out about Dune Part 2. And then that's going to lead to me questioning, does it actually deserve to be as high reviewed
Hmm.
as it is? I don't know.
Indeed.
So how do you feel about Dune Part 2?
I like it a lot. Christopher Walken as the Emperor is an interesting choice because I kept thinking of Balls of Fury when he was like the bad guy. Um,
I like
but
Dan Fogler a lot.
Dan Fogler is that the actor? Whatever
Yep.
happened to him?
Oh, he's still around. He does like guest spots on the Goldbergs. He was in those new Harry Potter movies. Uh most
Oh yeah.
most recently, he was in a movie, a big movie that just came out. And I was concerned because he's had like massive weight fluctuations. A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan movie.
Oh yeah.
He
I didn't know he was in
he's
that.
he's in that. Um
Good for him. I'm glad he's still getting work.
yeah.
That movie is surprisingly funny. It is crass and very mid 2000s, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's all right. Um,
Yeah. They
but
definitely tried to bill him as like a knockoff Jack Black, but I
yeah,
feel
I
like
think
he
he
has
pulls
his
it
own
off.
charm. Yeah.
He does, but I think he pulled that off pretty well. This is the Dan Fogler cast. We're here to talk about Dune Fogler.
Dune,
Uh,
Dune Fogler. I would watch so much of Dune Fogler.
all right, so there's some pretty good like
It's the slow
edits.
knife that penetrates the shield.
there's some there's no lines like that in Dune 2, thank goodness that I
Yeah.
noticed. Um, the there's some great edits on YouTube of people editing people into things like Tony Soprano into God of War or like Mr. Bean into Fallout, things like
Yeah, yeah.
that. And we need Dan Fogler in Dune. Um, but Dune Part 2 is good. You alluded to like the trilogy treatment, like the Lord of the Rings treatment.
Mhm.
The big difference there is while I think there's a singular vision, I don't. Obviously, it wasn't made in the same way as the Lord of the Rings, where it was filmed
as
all at
one,
one time.
and then they
So that's
added to it in the years as they were
oh
coming
sure.
out. But yeah,
Well, yeah, but it was a singular vision as three movies, and
yeah,
it was like boom, boom, boom. We made all three of these movies at the same time. Dune doesn't have that. Uh, 1 and 2 were they filmed at the same time or no?
no,
Okay,
no,
I didn't think so, and I know Messiah obviously isn't being filmed that way.
no.
Um, but it's pretty good. I don't think it has the same impact as the first one. I think the first one is, and this is not to say there's anything bad about Dune Part Two. I keep saying Dune Two, which makes me think of Doom Two, which is very different. Or the unknown sequel to David Lynch's Dune, surprisingly good, by the way. If
Yeah.
we want to make comparisons later on, but
Isn't there something weirdly comforting? Like, I would have hated it if I hadn't seen Dunes Part 1 and 2. I would have just hated the voiceover. But isn't there something weirdly comforting about the hand holding and like guiding you through what's happening? Like, I don't know, man.
yes and no, because there's some things that you can infer. Um, because like Irulan does the opening monologue, which is odd because she's such a non-character in the first one. Is like, why
Mhm.
is she the one doing this? But anyway, but then like some of the stuff she explains, they then explain again. So like, there's
Yes.
some stuff that they could have gotten rid of. But yeah, I think it's better than say Blade Runner, the voiceover from Blade Runner, which
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like, this is my
intentionally
cigar.
done badly. Yeah.
Yeah, this is my cigar from the producer saying, nobody's got to understand what's going on. You gotta have Harrison Ford talking about it.
Yeah. And
And
Harrison
but
Ford is like, I'll just deliver this the worst way I possibly can so they won't want to put it in the movie. And then they
it's
just
then they put it in the movie. It's like take one, and they're like, "Great, Harrison, you can go home. Uh, we got it in one. Look at that. That's lunch, everybody."
it's
But,
so jarring. It's
but I got to go back and watch Blade Runner. I haven't seen it in 15 years,
too
maybe.
bad she won't live. But
See
then
that I
again,
don't.
who does?
Oh, that's a good line. Is that Rutger Hauer?
No, that is I
Oh,
keep
that's
wanting to say James
that
Earl
big guy
Jones.
with the mustache. Oh,
Battlestar Galactica, Edward James
Edward James
Olmos.
Olmos. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Whoa.
oh
You're
yeah, I have my invisible beverage today. And my invisible water
Yeah.
because they're both like green. Oops.
Awesome.
I've worn a shirt with green stuff on it before, and it just had holes in me. Whoa! Oh no, you could edit in like an after effect of like a green screen and just
This would be
change
the
your
only thing that
the
was
only
just here.
thing that was keyed. Yeah,
Had
and
like a
it's like
secret picture behind me, and this is the only way
Paul
to.
Atreides. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Also, I made a joke on Twitter that should have done numbers, and it didn't. And I said, why do people keep calling Paul Atreides Mob Deep in this? And for those of you listening, Mob Deep was an American hip hop group in the early '90s, which is why which is why that tweet went nowhere, um, because I'm an old man. Anyway, I think that Dune Part One was so unique and interesting, and that singular vision was something that we hadn't gotten before. And you're not going to have that splash. You're not going to have that novelty with the sequel because it's essentially the same thing. But the fact that it wasn't like a year apart, like Lord of the Rings, I think it loses some of the steam associated with that splash. It's
Fair.
still visually interesting, but a lot of that is not there. They did introduce some new things, and not to spoil anything.
What? No, you can spoil it. This is spoilers. It's out.
Uh,
Watch it. It's been on
okay.
HBO Max forever.
It's pretty good. You can just stop watching. Go watch Dune 2. No, wait, no, don't do that. But
Come
like
back.
the baby worms,
Yeah.
the water stores underground, the massive congregation where nobody is elevated. It's just like a huge open underground meeting space. Things like that were
Yeah,
really
the
cool.
lore of the Fremen in general is like a huge welcome
Yeah.
addition. Yeah.
Oh, and Giedi Prime is really cool, but they don't really do anything. It's all like they have a black sun, and so everything is negative
Yes.
on Giedi Prime. That was really
Yes.
interesting, but they don't
Shot
spend
in
enough
camera.
time. Really,
Yep.
I did not know that. That's really cool, but they don't spend enough time on Giedi Prime, and they don't explore Giedi Prime. It's like the Colosseum, and then the place where the Harkonnens live, and that's about it.
I think they don't explore the Harkonnens and Fade Routha or any of it at all enough,
Mm, yeah,
especially for the
I,
runtime of the movie.
which is long. I just grabbed
Long.
the box. 3.
166 minutes.
Okay, and not
14
quite
minutes
3
shy of
hours.
3 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I've never seen Schindler's List, and it came up in conversation. I was like, "Well, how long is it?" It's 3 hours 15 minutes.
Yes.
Blade Runner 2049 minute running time.
Two
It's
hours,
one of my favorite
20, 40.
one of my favorite jokes to come out of that movie.
Oh, 20. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
2049 minute runtime.
Yeah.
What do you think about Dune Part 2?
At first, I was absolutely blown away. I thought I was watching the next big thing. Someone made a point of saying that like Star Wars came out in the late 70s, early 80s.
Hmm.
Lord of the Rings was filmed in the late 90s, came out in the early 2000s. Another 20-year jump. We have the 2020s. We're getting the next big thing. Like that was
Hmm.
I was fully on board with that. But some stuff bothered me off the bat about how so much of what's happening with who is pitched as the main antagonist, the Harkonnens,
Hmm.
everything happening off screen. Everything about their struggle with the Fremen, you see some of it, but most of the victories and turns of battle are happening off screen. Fade Routha taking control of the armies and turning the tides happens off screen. Like that would just stuck with me.
Hmm.
And then when I rewatched the movie, I realized that like 80% of the material of the story that seemed like it had consequence or conflict in it was being resolved off screen.
Hmm.
And what we were actually spending time with is tension over things that we already knew were going to happen. Whether we saw it in the trailer, like uh, Paul riding the worm,
Hmm.
or whether it's just something that you automatically know because you're an experienced moviegoer based on the language, you know what's going to happen.
Hmm.
I think the climax between Fade Rautha and Paul, there's enough back and forth to not be 100% sure what's going to happen, but in the end you kind of know that he's the main character and this is, got to be what it's got to be, but there's some tension there. There's some I don't know. The story that they made Dune Part 2 is is Paul going to live up to and use this authority as Muad'Dib, and is that going to bring him the revenge that he wants and the power that he wants?
Hmm.
And I'm not it seems like such a deviation from what the conflict seemed like it was. I like there is so much going on in this movie and it somehow feels unexplored despite being explored.
Hmm.
Like Paul's genuine attachment to the Fremen, but he's still kind of using them. And ultimately the decision he has to make in marrying the princess is taking the side of using the Fremen and leaving them to
Hmm.
their, I guess, newfound freedom, even though they're still under like Arrakis is still under the control of the Empire and will still be mined. So it's just I'm not entirely sure what happened. Like there's a lot to chew on, but not a lot that actually happened.
Ah. Mm, hmm. So, for example, the like a lot of the battles, for example, you mentioned that had they been played out into battle scenes instead of like a montage of like the Fremen are winning, would that have been?
There's not even a montage of the Fremen winning. We have the initial sequence where the Fremen are breathing through tubes and they bust out and they take down like a
Hmm.
Harkonnen like navigating ship. And there's supposed to be some tension there, like is this flying ship going to shoot down the two main characters? It's like, okay, no, but still this looks great and this is a well-directed action sequence. Um and then there's another sequence where they meet Josh Brolin,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I would be hard pressed to find any scene where you go into it thinking, okay, like other than the very end of the movie, which again happens mostly off screen, there's not really a scene where it's like, here are the Harkonnen, here are the Fremen, they are in combat. We don't know what the outcome of this battle is going to be. Are they going to win more territory to the north? Are the Harkonnens going to win more territory to the south? There is no scene that actually depicts that.
Yeah. They talk about it in like the war room, the Harkonnen war room.
Yes.
And I think it's more impactful given that I don't know. So like the stakes are really Fade Routha and Bautista, Dave Bautista. What is his name?
Yes. Something
Uh,
Harkonnen.
Mad Bull Harkonnen. That's
Yeah.
not Mad Dog Harkonnen. Um, like this, I think functionally in terms of like the scene, it's that power is now being handed over from him to Fade Routha, and he's much more brutal, and he's shrewd, and they have an attack on the Fremen that jeopardizes things. I think that's enough for a movie going audience. Do you feel like it's like
It's enough to
getting?
know that it happened,
Mhm.
but it's weird to not see that it happened.
Well, we do
It
see them attack.
the bell that it rings in my head is the bell that rings every time you see a character is close to death and then someone says they died off screen.
Hmm.
What's the rule? What do you know from film language?
They're not dead,
They're
right?
not dead. It just rings that bell that like, oh, well, now that Fade Ralph here, we're being really successful. But you're not. You fail, like, and Paul makes it directly into the main base, makes it to the Emperor, and everything falls apart. So, like, what really was happening? Like, I don't
I,
know.
I feel like they do enough justice to the logistics of war and the push and pull.
Okay.
Um, but I get where you're coming from. Of what's the point of framing it this way and setting these scenes up in this order
Mm,
and not having a fully fleshed out. I do think that they made the right choice with everything else that they wanted to tell. They wanted to tell a story about Paul first and foremost,
hmm.
and so it's mostly him learning about the Fremen. So I
Yeah.
think they made the right call. I do think that they could have had the cutoff be a little different from one movie to another.
Yeah.
I don't remember any particulars from the first one, but I do feel like they could have trimmed out a little bit of stuff from the first one and then ended it a little later, then making room in the second one for some of the stuff you're describing.
Mm. Like about, are you saying you would go, the first one would go farther into part two before it ended?
Correct, yeah.
How far do you think?
Well, I'd have to remember where this one starts and
I
what happens in it.
I agree with you. The thing that I'm thinking of the structure of Fellowship of the Ring and how there is this climactic battle of Moria and a tragedy and Gandalf dying.
Mhm.
And then there is a lingering aftermath where the characters get to safety. Similar to Dune Part 1, where they find the Fremen, and then there's this small conflict where they earn their place among the Fremen. But there is then a climax, a second climax of the movie with the Uruk-hai, where they eventually split their separate ways and you're set up for the next movie, but the characters establish themselves as on the different trajectories that they're going to be for the two towers. Like Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, one direction, Merry, Pippin, kidnapped, one direction, Frodo, Sam, another direction. And I think in Dune Part 2, you would have that with the combat from the opening sequence that shows Paul and his mother aligned with the Fremen attacking a Harkonnen ship
Mm,
and successfully taking down a few of them, showing that they're on their way in a certain direction. And it introduces this idea that people do believe, oh, Paul knows our ways. And it sort of sets things up. And then you could have had your small, like, victory sort of ending from part one
mm,
instead of having to pick up the pieces of part one at the beginning of part two. And then even then you wouldn't be starting this movie with this Harkonnen versus Fremen sort of conflict and then spend so much time away from that developing Paul's ascendance to chosen one, uh not godhood, but what would you call it, authority figure,
yeah.
something
Yeah.
like, um yeah, it just, there's so much in the movie that should be like big revelations, which again this movie suffers from a similar thing from part one, where the evil emperor is my grandfather. That has been done so many times that that is actually copying Rise of Skywalker more than it is
Oh Lord.
copying the first one. Um, but it's handled so matter of factly because again, Paul learns that information off screen, then tells his mother, "I learned it."
Yeah.
And and it kind of happens off screen. They kind of show like a flashback. They show the babies like being born, and they show whatever. And it's just the revelations seem so matter of fact. Everything that's happened seems so matter of fact, especially after Paul is poisoned by the worm. It's it seems procedural at that point. Like he lays out what's going to happen and he has quick visions of what's going to happen, and then it just happens the way he sort of navigates. I wish we could see more of the stakes of what could go wrong so that there was more tension in different moments on, is he going to follow the right path or not?
Hmm. I To go back to the cutoff point, I just to clarify, you mean like some time has passed. He's already to a degree ingratiated himself with the Fremen, and they're
Mm-hmm.
already raiding or attacking the Harkonnens. What I was thinking was like that we get to the point where his mother drinks the water of life, and there's a cliffhanger of like, is she going to be okay? Something like that. Keep tension
That's
up
pretty
instead of.
far.
Yeah, but they could have finagled things a little differently.
Hmm.
I think, but I lost it. I don't know. I don't know
I
what I was gonna say.
The thing is, there's a central story of Paul in both movies,
Mhm.
and the emotional core of the first movie seems to be his relationship with his family and his father and his mother, and how
Mhm.
different those relationships are in the way that she's sort of an instructor and his father is an emotional support. But he's trying to train Paul to be a leader, but his mom has this other angle of him being a different leader. And the death of Paul's father sets him on a new path. And I think it is fair that the next story is that new path where he starts to decide for himself what being a leader means, what his own success is going to mean, what his revenge is going to look like. And those are two separate stories. And I think it's fair for that to happen. But I agree, a cliffhanger like that, where the characters have sort of descended from a certain pillar of their society through Arrakis into the heart of the Fremen, into the south of the Fremen, where there's this like linear journey of where they're moving culturally until there's this like big impact if someone is fundamentally changed, and what is that going to mean? Like I feel like that would work, but I feel like it's a story that's less focused on Paul.
Yeah. And that seems to be the intention, is to stay on him at all
Mm,
times. I don't think it was to the movie's detriment. I think that they did well. I do agree they could have made some tweaks and changes to make it a little more interesting.
hmm
But overall, I it was made well. Now, um, what did so you said that you initially thought like this is the next big thing, and then it's kind of diminished a little bit. What did critics think about
So CinemaScore gave it an A. They gave Dune Part One an A minus. They
it?
gave this one an A. So again, this is people coming out writing on their scorecard what they thought A, B, C, D, E, F, and it sounded like I put an E in there, but I didn't. Um,
I got an E,
for
you know.
everyone. Um,
Yeah.
so reception was higher, but then again, people who liked Dune Part One want to go see Part Two, and I wonder if that's a part of it. So, Metacritic. All right, generally favorable, 79, which is not as high as I thought it would be. That's based on 62. And then 8.4 for 1,400 user reviews.
Oof.
So we're not in like A territory when it comes to Metacritic, but I noticed I think Metacritic is a little more harsh with its reviews than a lot of other sites.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if that's just because they have less people, like it's a different population of people who are interested in Metacritic. But just as a reminder, uh, Dune Part 1 got a 74. So 79 is a much higher score. And so again, we're seeing what could be it found its audience. So the people who are reviewing it are people who would like it. And uh I'm now trying to use like facts to fit my theory instead of building a theory based on fact.
Uh-huh.
But IMDb an 8.5 out of 10. Again, not as high as I thought it would be.
Hmm.
Out of 591,000 ratings.
Oh.
Why were so many passionate to rate this? What the heck?
Uh,
Um okay. So 31% gave it a 10 out of 10. 28% gave it a 9 out of 10. 21% of people. So almost 80% of people gave it an 8 or higher. And then you have trailing off. You have like 10% gave it a 7. So less than 10% is split among 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm
hmm.
very curious to see what the 1-star ratings are.
Movie bad. Movie too long. I'm
Ah,
always wary of the extremes.
it's
Uh,
trying to get me to open an app. An act. It's happening
Open
with my
that act,
mouth today.
boys.
Um, no, I'm sure I'll find something more rewarding on Rotten Tomatoes, so I'm gonna go there.
I you you said something like, why were people so passionate to rate this? That's a good question. And it sounds like user ratings across the board are in that like solid B
Mm-hmm.
um, rating. Do you include letterboxed or no?
I don't. We should, shouldn't we? That's aggregate scoring.
Yeah, I mean we
Let's add
can.
Letterbox today. Oh,
Uh,
just remind me, Companion came out. I just saw Companion. If you guys get the chance to go see it, you want to see that for like date night for Valentine's Day or something like that, it's phenomenal. Um,
Companion noted.
yeah. It's try not to look up too much about it. If you look up the trailer, just look up trailer number 1
Mm.
and
Well,
only watch that.
I see 2025 American science fiction horror comedy film. So yeah, I'm not gonna look anything up. Still haven't watched The Substance. I think we're gonna watch that soon. I'd love to watch it.
Yeah.
debating being under the influence while I watch it. Um,
Uh,
it doesn't look so. Look, hey, you know me. One of my favorite horror movies, as we discussed on this episode, is The Thing,
I,
which
I
is extreme body horror.
I think being sharp for the substance will allow you to enjoy the anticipation of what the hell is going to happen based on what a character just decided. I think it might be worth
Mm,
that.
okay.
But
And it escalates continuously, right? Like it's just you have no idea where it's going to go next, and then it goes, even though you didn't know, in a direction that you couldn't have expected to begin with.
I think it's enough for you to get like it's more like you're not expecting it, but as soon as it starts to happen, you're like, "Oh my gosh, of course this is where it was going. Holy shit, what's going to happen?" Like,
Is it a like? Surely they wouldn't do this, and then they do it.
yes. Yes.
Okay, all right, I love that.
Um
I'm very eager to see the substance.
especially
It
like the trajectory of that movie is like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, what's happening? Oh, where's it going? Why is this director so obsessed with butts? Like, I get the youth and all that, but why so obsessed with butts? And then the ending is like, what?
it does a more than a hockey stick. It
Yes.
just zoop,
Yeah.
and
Which some
I've
people don't
seen
like. Some people dislike the ending for how it goes, but
my sister told me that she watched it in the theater when it came out in the theater, and that she didn't walk out, but she totally understands why people walked out.
mhm.
Um, I would love to talk about the substance and whether or not it got the appropriate critical response once we watch that.
I would love to do an episode on that.
Cool. Next
Um,
one. Stay tuned.
good.
So what's Letterbox?
Because
Did you pull that up?
next month is going to
Oh,
be the
oh.
Oscars, and Substance is up for Best
Ah.
Picture.
Oh,
So
best picture? No way. An
yes,
R-rated body horror.
yes,
See,
for
that's
like
with
the first time.
when the Academy does things like that. I
Yeah,
love that. Dune
yeah.
2, let me go ahead and spoiler for my opinion on critical response, does not deserve to be best picture of 2024.
Okay. Um. No.
Now,
Well, my question is: have you seen a movie in 2024 that you think is better suited?
Eric, I watched 5 new movies in last year.
And they
Yes,
were
you know
all
what?
better than Dune Part Two.
No, absolutely not. You know what? Too Fast, Too Furious.
No. Fuck you, I'm
I
done. No.
I am frankly baffled that I was under attack at your house for a get together, and I said that, and everyone's
No.
there's that little comic, where like somebody like quietly says like one word, and then everybody in the room is like up in arms and screaming. I made the confession that Too Fast, Too Furious was my favorite Fast and Furious movie.
Do you ever watch Mr. Sunday movies?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
When they were covering Fast and the Furious, there's this amazing thing that happened where there was a glitch on Amazon Prime that had inappropriately saturated the movie's skin tones and things. So
Oh no.
everybody looked like lobster red.
Awesome.
And one of them watched the whole movie that way, not knowing something was wrong, but still thinking this movie had just like made a choice.
Yeah.
And it's worth looking at. I think that was a fun
That,
video
that
that covers it.
there's real quick. It reminds me of some tweet about accidentally watched Breaking Bad at 1.5 times speed and didn't notice until I was halfway through, and I just thought, man, these guys are hauling ass today.
I feel like when people talk, you would notice, but okay.
Right, right.
Um,
Yeah.
so this is interesting. Rotten Tomatoes breakdown is interesting because on the front page it says it's a 92% certified fresh tomato meter, 95% popcorn meter audience reviews. This is the kind of up there over the top that I thought it was going to be. But when I press it, out of 78 critic reviews, it is actually only 87% of them gave it a positive review. And the average review is only a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay. Uh,
That's
uh,
interesting to me. That's a little low, I think. And the 95% of user reviews, the average is 4.7 out of 5, which is A territory. That's about
that's
like 4.75 is, yeah.
that's. I think 9.7 is way too high. But yes, 7.4 is that?
4.7
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 4.7. I
out
was,
of out of 5.
I guess I was doing the conversion.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's way too high. Uh, but yeah, 7.4 out of 10. Is that what it was? 74%.
Yeah,
That
7.5.
that's a bit low.
That is a bit low. I definitely think this movie is at least B territory. I think some of it deserves A territory, but in some, I actually agree with the Academy. Like, it is one of the best movies that came out of the year. It is. I've seen a lot of the movies that came out that year, but it is really that way because of the technical aspects of the movie. I would say Timothy Chalamet's performance is a standout. I would say that Austin Butler's performance is a standout, but then he doesn't get to do much.
Hmm.
And so, like, writing wise, and the way they choose to take the story, and I do think that's a snub for direction. I think the movie is incredibly well directed. But but mostly to say, like, yeah, this is a great movie, but it's for all of these technical reasons. It's a pretty good summation of what's going on. And I think mostly the critic response I actually agree with, where it lands in this sort of audience rated high B territory.
Hmm.
Um,
I think that's appropriate.
but let's look at Letterboxd for the first time. I'm gonna have to
Blah, blah, blah.
part
Dune 2, how you doing?
2. 4.4 out of 5 stars. So that's like scaling that up, that's like an 87 to an 89.
Yeah, I I think a solid 4 is more in line with what I thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think of things out of 5. I think out of 5 is a purer um, score
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like past that point, like between 1 and 10, like you start to question a little bit, like should I go 6 or 7 or 8? You start to like, To me, a score out of 5 forces you to just pick, just boom, there it is. And I think a solid 4 is appropriate.
So solid 4 is like an 80.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, maybe a little more than that, but again, I don't like to include the decimals because at that point you might as well just be doing out of 10.
Yeah.
But it's not a 5. It's I am always hesitant to really truly support a big movie studio
Mm-hmm.
or any multi hundreds of millions of dollars production. I realize that people work on these movies and people deserve to get paid. People deserve to earn a living. I think that this movie is a rare circumstance where you have someone with a singular vision with enough, for lack of a better word, studio interference,
Mm-hmm.
with like the right amount of studio input. Because you don't have enough, you get the Star Wars prequels, you get Death Stranding, and you just get something that is so unpalatable, in my opinion. Not unpalatable, maybe Death Stranding.
Mm-hmm.
I Kojima, I love the Metal Gear Solid franchise, but Bud, I cannot stomach Death Stranding. And I when people tell me how much they love it, I'm like, this is Stockholm syndrome. This this is the sunk cost fallacy. Well, I spent 200 hours on it. I surely I must
I
have loved
must
it.
love it. Yeah.
No, but anyway, so I'm always hesitant to really be like rah 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 for any multi-$100 million production of any kind.
Fair.
Dune earns it. Dune
Okay.
does it well. It uses that money to really actually make a movie. Like
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
you made
It
comparisons to
it
the original Star Wars earlier where they actually worked. Like people worked hard to bring something to the table that was visually interesting, conceptually interesting, engaging, and I think it did that.
Mhm.
Uh, Best Picture 2024. I don't know. I don't. I just don't know.
Well, again,
Let me look at the list and we can
yeah,
revisit
I
that
was
at
gonna
some
say,
point.
what would be your? I mean, you can look at the list of nominations, but that's
Right.
not gonna
Yeah.
be. I mean, if you haven't seen them, that's not gonna be as interesting.
We can revisit it. We can talk about that at the end if we have a little extra time. But
Well,
I'm
I was
interested to
thinking
hear your
we
thoughts.
could talk about it more when you've seen The Substance because that is
Oh
another
yeah,
one
yeah,
that's
yeah.
up for that. So, um, yeah, but just like I fully expected to love this movie and have this one earn the hype that the first one had when I was like not as charmed by the first one. When in reality, this one did up my respect for the first Dune movie and the achievements
Hmm.
it is, and the depth of story and the depth of relationships between the characters, because I can feel what feels absent to me from this movie. And I think I
Hmm.
actually rate Dune Part 1 above Dune Part 2 for me.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. In fact, that reminds me, I this toes a line of do I have to watch the first one before I watch the second one?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's real close
I
because
think
to
absolutely you lose something in not having the passion Paul has for revenge. I think that's
Mhm.
completely lost. So,
I think that it's tough, but that like for example, between Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, I think Empire Strikes Back is a really good example of like it's 80% standalone, maybe. You know, it's
mm,
yeah, you should probably watch the first one,
mm,
but they do a really good job of
yeah,
like shorthanding like okay, this is how these characters relationships work. These are bad guys. It's like real quick, hey, bad. This guy bad. These people
yeah,
good. This is how they interact with each other. Okay, now we'll start. And I never thought
yeah.
about this before, but it's almost as if Hoff is like a we need to put these characters in a situation where they can very quickly and summarily display themselves. And
I
they do
mean,
that. And then they're like, okay, now we can start the rest of the movie where we go to Dagobah and Cloud City.
there is a genius in the first two Star Wars movies that they start very similar. They introduce that there are good guys and there are bad guys, and that the good guys have just made a huge strike against the bad guys.
Mm.
And so the bad guys are in pursuit of the good guys. That is the same for both A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. And the thing about Empire Strikes Back is it kicks off sort of running. There's a like you
Mm-hmm.
said, they establish the relationships between the characters. Han caring about Luke and going for him, Leia being concerned. Her relationship with Han is this strained potential romance, and everything is set in motion. And these are things that weren't necessarily present in the first movie, so they're unique and contained within this story. And those relationships are the core of that movie.
Right.
They're not necessarily oh Leia is caught between Luke and Han because they both saved her life in the first movie and you have to care about the first movie in order to do that. No, they're all just rebels. It doesn't matter that they saved her in the first movie. This is what their relationships are.
I agree. And do I feel that Dune Part Two does that as effectively? No. It, you should. It's like 55%. You don't need to watch the first one, whereas Empire was like 80%.
Because also you have the culture shock of moving from Paul Atreides' home planet to Arrakis. You know,
Oh yeah,
like
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
automatically thrust into the middle of Arrakis and the Fremen in this movie, and you don't have the frame of reference.
And they do such a good job
Yeah.
of like everything is like deeply saturated.
Mm.
From like making the
Oh,
movie perspective, like on Caladan, everything is like deep blues and greens and blacks, and none of that is present on Arrakis.
give me just a second.
Okay. Hi there, this is Will. I'm here to talk about stuff while Eric is up, and he's already back, so never mind.
Okay.
Oh, I know where you're going with this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Color. Bum, bum, bum. Sabi was telling me these movies. This is my wife. The movies sort of blend together to her, where sometimes she can't tell, the difference. But like, there's
Mm,
there's like main cast members that like stick out that are only there in the first one. But to me, these movies are color coded,
hmm.
soft sand and burning sunset. Like,
I remembered right before you brought it up. I was like, the cover is completely opposite. Like the color spectrum.
yeah.
And that's good. I mean, that establishes that very well in the movie itself of like, and then when they get to Arrakis and it's like blinding white sand,
Mm-hmm.
and they step out onto the plaza and everything, and everything is desaturated.
Mm.
It makes you, hey, and any what's the word, aspiring filmmakers out there, that's how you make the audience feel the way your characters feel, and it will resonate. To
Yep.
quote one of the greatest movie critics of our generation, you won't notice, or you didn't notice, but your brain did. Oh, also, Bad
We
Boys
got
Ride or
it. We
Die
got
was
our
the
red letter
best.
media reference in. At least one per episode.
That's right. Bad Boys Ride or Die was the best movie of 2024, by the way. It was you could stop. You're mugging at me. I know. No, but if I may be real for a moment, it does have one of the I was talking to my wife about this last night, about the last time I was on the edge of my seat in a movie.
Hmm.
Honestly, the last time I was on the edge of my seat was Bad Boys Ride or Die.
Is
The
it the
reason
sequence where the
it's
boyfriend is going
the
off?
sequence, yes, that sequence, and it
Yes.
because we watched them all relatively close to each other,
Yeah,
like in the
me
span of a
too.
week, and then we
Yep.
went to the movies. Seeing him in Bad Boys 2 as like, oh, the kid
The
who's so
scared
quiet,
kid.
and they're just picking on him, and to see him do this in Bad Boys Ride or Die is so satisfying.
Yeah.
But in particular, it's because, and this is, because we're talking about Dune 2, I'm going to have to relate this to Dune 2, something that I didn't really feel while watching Dune 2. And not just because I had read the book, but simply because, like, you talk about like the language of movies, the good guy's going to win. Like
Yeah,
you,
well also they numb it. The movie itself, if you didn't watch movies, telegraphs to you that the characters are
mm,
going to win.
and that is something I was unsure of while watching that scene in Bad Boys Ride or Die.
Yes. Because in the
Was
drama of these kinds of movies, like Fast and the Furious or Bad Boys, characters, I mean, a lot of times they just come back to life and it gets campy, but they're expendable. It is
yeah,
possible for someone to be like, oh, I saved the family, but I'm dying myself. There is an actual threat on the table.
yep, and they got me. Like I was
Yeah.
on the edge of my seat. I was like, bro, what? But the reason we were talking about it is because the last time before that it happened was Interstellar
Oh,
in
the
one of
docking sequence. Oh.
yeah, and it has the best name on the soundtrack, and that's what I would call that scene is No Time for Caution,
Mm.
and it's one of the most tense, well done scenes I've ever seen because hey, movie studios, hey, if you want and aspiring filmmakers, hi, it's me again. If you want your audience to feel something, have stakes and make it an original story. Because when
Yeah.
you base something on something else, it's like, oh, well, we know.
We know the beats.
Oh, this is based on a book. We know the book, and it's going to be like they're going to live or they're going to die or whatever. Interstellar is it's just Interstellar, and we had already seen some pretty horrifying things, like 30 years or whatever passing, and they come back to the space station and the guy's like, oh, I thought you guys were never coming back. That's really harrowing. So when that
Mm.
scene with the spinning space station, one, Matt Damon just exploded and you
Yes.
didn't know that was going to happen.
Yes.
And you're like, uh-oh. So you're already like elevated. And then
Mm.
the whole thing starts going out of control. You don't know what's going to happen. And so at that point,
Yeah.
they had already established that maybe his daughter Murph or his son may be the crux of the story after that point.
Yeah.
So like he could die and the rest of the movie follows them. You have no idea what's going to happen.
And also literally you have no idea because like you said there's no source material, there's no frame of reference. It is possible that the way that it works out is the person on board finds a way to slow the spinning. Like you just that simple bit of maze of you don't know what's going to happen, but the character makes you this little promise that what I'm going to try is something insanely impossible, and then the music, the score of that movie just ramps up.
That that organ, there's not enough organ in action scenes because it I will never forget seeing that in IMAX and literally being on the edge of my seat.
Yeah.
Like I was like this. Like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? Oh my God.
Yeah,
Uh
Interstellar's amazing.
yeah, it sure is. A bit long.
11 years
Um
old.
yeah, that hurts. But anyway, yeah, Dune 2, you don't get that. And again, like I it's hard for me to fault Dune 2 for that because you don't really get that anywhere
Right.
in a lot of movies. So I don't know. It's not a bad thing. I'm just really passionate about feeling something when I'm watching a movie,
Yeah.
and it happens so seldom that I was immediately able to tell you, oh, Bad Boys Ride or Die and Interstellar are the last times that I was like in suspense, like with what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But in fairness, I don't watch a lot of movies like that. I used to. I don't anymore. Um, I have brought up the list, and I can tell you that I have not seen. I have seen one of these movies,
This Dune.
Dune Part Two. uh, but I would love to see at least one or two more and talk about it.
What is the list? Can you
More.
read it off for me real quick? I can't
Sure.
remember.
Sneak peek for the next episode. In no particular order, Dune Part Two, The Substance, both of which we mentioned, A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan biopic, also Timothy Chalamet.
Mhm.
He could pull a Michael Keaton and be in. Oh wait, no, that was 2 years in a row that he starred in the Best Picture,
Mm.
and he bleep this if you want. Can clearly be seen in the second year when it was Spotlight, I think, because it was Birdman and then Spotlight.
Mhm.
You can clearly see him go, fuck yeah, like at the Academy Awards. Like he is like, yeah, I did it. But then Wicked, which no one
Right.
mourns, which I
Right.
didn't see. It is it's an adaptation of
I
a
recently watched an
musical.
in-depth review of the book and I felt so justified in my criticisms of the movie and I want to talk
Mm.
about it really badly.
Do you want to save it for next time?
No, definitely not. I think you should see it. I think we
Okay,
should do
I'll
that down
I'll
the
I'll
line.
I'll, I'll do my best. Top of my priority list is The Substance.
Mhm.
But after that, so we have Honora. I have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
Conclave,
I haven't seen
which
it, but
is
I know what it is.
oh okay. Conclave, which is the picking a new pope,
Yes.
and I've heard a lot of good things about it in the
Great.
sense of like it's not like it's a like a political thriller, but there's no like political thriller things that happen. Like there's no murder or anything. It's just like
Well, close. It definitely feels like the same sort of tension. It's somehow it is a contained within the aspects of the church political
mm,
thriller. So it's
right.
just religious politics, but there is, I mean, no spoilers, but kind of spoilers. Like there is a moment where people could have been killed because
Okay,
of
yeah.
protesting, something.
Like tensions get elevated or tempers get elevated and people may fly off the handle. Is that what you're saying?
No, and like a bomb goes off.
Oh, literal bomb.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Amelia Perez.
I haven't seen it. It's Netflix. People are divided. Yeah.
Yep, I've heard. Nickel Boys.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm Still Here.
No idea what that is.
So here is that not also Bob Dylan? Um, what is that movie with Bob Dylan? The last time he was played by
A
like four
Complete
different people.
Unknown.
No,
Oh,
the one from before.
oh, the one where one of them was Kate Blanchett.
Yeah, that's the one. Huh. Yeah, I've never heard of this movie. I think it's in Portuguese.
Okay. Oh, yes, there is a foreign
Brazil. Yeah.
film nominated for. Yeah. Okay.
Ainda
Um.
estou aqui because I don't speak Portuguese. I speak Spanish, and Portuguese is like Spanish weird
Yeah.
Spanish. Sorry, Portugal and Brazil.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I've seen Dune Part 2. I intend to watch The Substance. I would like to. Oh, I skipped one. I'm so sorry. The Brutalist,
Oh, yeah.
which is about the
The three
architect
hour
played by.
long.
Oh, that is
Yeah.
brutal.
Hmm. That's the same joke I made when I heard it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
um. So yeah, that's the list that we're going to be talking about next time, and I will do my best. You heard it here first, folks. I'm going to watch at least one more of these.
Yeah, I don't think we need to make it like an Oscars thing. We're gonna probably do that in the other podcast. And I'm not big on the Academy Awards. I'm not big on that whole
Mm,
ceremony and whatnot. But my theory, my running theory that horror is becoming the next mainstream blockbuster thread,
mm,
like as superhero movies die out, to see horror start to creep its way into mainstream acceptance and to have these continual like 3 out of 4 of the big releases were thrillers or horror movies in January. And like it's coming. And that's why I was so interested that The Substance and The Brutalist are nominated. And yeah, so I'd like to talk about The Substance, Wicked, and Nosferatu.
mm.
Those would be three
Oh,
episodes that I'd really want to do.
oh, Lord. Okay.
The you must bounce on it. Crazy style.
If only.
One of my favorite things to come out of TikTok recently.
Are we going to talk about the Razzies? Because we could
Oh, we
talk about
can.
that.
Sure.
Let me go ahead and give you the nominees for Worst Picture at the Raspberry Awards.
Okay.
Borderlands, which I have
Yeah.
not seen, but it looks trill bad.
Deserved.
Joker Folie uh,
Deserved.
Madam Web.
Oh my gosh. If that's not the winner, I don't know what world we live in.
It. I haven't seen it, but I've heard so many bad things about it. I heard so many bad things. So
I think
there's a
I've been
lot of
harsher on it than anyone I know.
really.
I think I have been because I think this movie is actually insulting to women.
Oh no. I was
I
going to say there's a lot of conversation about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and
mm,
people will review bomb movies if they perceive it as like, oh, well, this is too like Ghostbusters 2016 is a
mm,
good example of like, well, it's for women. That's woke, and I'm gonna review bomb it.
mm,
So I always take negative reviews of like, for example, a woman centric film with a grain of salt. That said, everyone, every single person that I talk to has said how bad Madam Web is,
yes.
including the people that share that feeling of like, well, they take those reviews with a grain of salt. They're not going to review something because it's a woman led film or woman centric film.
Yes.
And even they are like, whew, that movie's real bad.
Yeah. It is one of those things that it's like fascinatingly bad to where someone would want to watch it. And I still encourage you, do not give it traffic. Actually, maybe go ahead and watch it now because after Craven, Sony finally announced that that universe is done.
Oh,
They've
Madam Web was part of that.
yes.
Oh, I see.
Yes, to make a long story short, my issue with Madam Web when it comes to women in general is they lied and teased in the trailer that it was going to be 3 Spider Women like that were coming involved in the story, and that's only in flash forwards. The characters never actually become that within the movie. Um and those characters, so it's like a tease of like you're going to get to see Spider-Woman, you're going to get to see that power fantasy related to women. And in actuality, the way that those girls end up being heroes is that Madam Web teaches them how to do CPR, and the way that they're really heroes is by being people.
All right.
And it
So
it just like yeah, superheroes are a thing, but you know what a real hero is? Someone who goes, it's just like, oh my gosh, can you not, in the movie where you're trying to do like a female led thing where I
so there's a line. I think that that's an important message because I do agree with that sentiment
uh
that that if you ever think to yourself someone else will do something, there is nobody else.
yeah.
You have to do something. I thoroughly agree with that statement. There is a line of correctly illustrating that to your audience.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're telling me that someone, well, before I get to that, Superman is a great example. Superman is one of my all-time favorite superheroes
Mm-hmm.
because I think of Superman as, oh, if I had superpowers, I could do so many good things in the world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
you
you have
mentioned
to
that
take
last
a
time and that
step
really
back
stuck with me.
of like, I can do so many good things in the world,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of whether or not I have superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? You might have superpowers that you don't know about. I can't remember the comic artist or whatever about like we all have superpowers. Hey, he turns to a guy, he's talking to his kid, and he turns to a guy in the street and says, "Hey, you got a cool hat on, man." And the guy's like, "Oh, thank you." And then the guy smiles and he's like, "See, kid, we do have superpowers." Whatever. I'm getting
Yeah.
sappy about this. But there's a line. Superman generally is like, oh, in and of itself rides that line. Maybe individual movies or comics don't. Squid Game season 2 is another example of like it comes this close to beating you over the head with like, but it does it gets so close it does it what I think people need to see, which is, have you watched Squid Game season 2?
No.
Did you watch season 1?
Yeah.
So you know the vote after a game of like,
Mm-hmm.
do we stay or do we go?
Mm-hmm.
That's more centric, more central to the story of the second season because now they have to wear a patch saying that they voted yes or no in the last vote.
Ooh.
And so you're clearly labeling yourself when you vote. And they're in a situation where they can try and make money and risk their lives or abandon that system entirely, saving their lives. And people continually put themselves in danger by voting for that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, does that reflect real life themes at all? Who knows?
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is like it gets this close to like being like grabbing you by the shoulders and saying you are voting in real life for things that harm you because you think there's a remote chance that you could get rich.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't do that. It comes so close to beating you over the head, but it doesn't. It stops just short. And it's like the only thing it doesn't do is tell you you are doing this in real life.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't cross that line.
Like do a montage of people just making all kinds of purchases and doing all kinds of things that like
Yeah.
reflect. Yeah.
It doesn't do that. But if you're telling me that in Madam Web, someone literally tells another character,
No.
okay, all right. Oh,
And
whew.
that's why I think I'm the only person I've seen that has brought this up. I don't think that's an issue that other people have kind of stepped on. To me though, it's just like that the movies like marketing and things promised this type of power fantasy, this sort of different angle of representation, and then actually delivered the movie and said, you don't need that, you need this.
Mm.
It's it's just a little nasty. Like maybe not even insulting. It's just a little not okay.
I got you.
Um yeah.
And it's a shame. I'm reading right now. S.J. Clarkson made her feature film directorial debut with Madam Web.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Um, oh boy. Oh boy. Um, I'm looking at the cast list. Dakota Johnson as Cassandra Webb, a paramedic who, after an accident, develops psychic abilities which allow her to see the future within the spider world.
You know what? You know what? Female-led
Yeah.
superhero movie. Let's talk about it with the substance.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
let's go to what Skittles O'Henry is doing, and we'll bring this back up next time.
Skittles O'Henry's stream is still occasional. Still planning on finishing Alan Wake 2, both DLCs, and then moving on to the Dark Souls series, probably. Um, may start recording and editing his own videos. We'll see. And I'll ask your thoughts on things like DaVinci Resolve.
It's I can tell you briefly. It's supposedly great. It is a one-time purchase instead of a subscription fee.
Mm,
It is used to make mainstream movies. Apparently, there's kind of a steep learning curve, but once you get it, it's one of the most satisfying products to use for editing. And it gives you the most options in terms of like color grading and technical aspects of wanting to create something. It's things that you probably don't think about when you think about just like casual video production. But for people who want to take that video production seriously, it's one of the best resources you have out there. I use Adobe Premiere Pro and I do very, very minimal editing. But, you know, to me, I've gone the direction of I need to be able to get things done as easily and quickly as possible versus having the time to like make things as in depth of a quality and as carefully pinpointed and spend as much time on it as
mm,
possible. So I end up using something like CapCut.
yeah.
Um, so
I
CapCut and
haven't seen the
Adobe are
watermark,
subscriptions. So you haven't seen the watermark?
the CapCut watermark anywhere.
Oh, CapCut,
I
you can only edit, I think, up to 10 minutes of video at a time. So
oh,
I
I see.
use
I
Adobe
gotcha.
Premiere Pro for this.
Right, right. It's like seeing an iFunny watermark or a CapCut watermark. It's always funny to me.
Yeah, CapCut, they just automatically, and you can delete it, but they put a tag at the end of your movie that's like, "Brung, it's CapCut." And then,
Right, that's fair. I don't mind that. Um,
mm,
but what I've been playing off stream, I replayed the first act of Inscription, which, if you haven't heard of Inscription, don't look it up. Just play it.
okay.
It is a wholly unique experience.
I'm kind of in favor of going in blind to a lot of things lately. And I'm someone who appreciates movie trailers as something that can be an art form when they're not mass producing constantly just taking old songs and slowing them down to make them ominous. Or we're
Cutting
finally,
black, scene, black, scene.
yes, and the tried and true Inception Bois that lasted for like 10 years. When things get inventive, I specifically the 28 years later trailer is is art, I think.
Really?
It's
I haven't actually watched it.
it's great. They take this old Rudyard recording of from like the 1910s or 20s of a Rudyard Kipling poem called Boots,
Hmm.
and it is one of the most haunting things. And it teases just enough without telling you anything about what the actual story is. And Ray Fiennes is there and he's dirty. And and Taylor Johnson is doing his thing. It's it's so ominous, so creepy, and so enticing. And I can't get it out of my head. I listen to the Rudyard Kipling poem thing all the time. I used it to make a thing for the D&D night that I'm having. You should watch the trailer for
Wow.
that movie.
Yeah, I will watch it. Uh, I miss the days, and even back in the day, it was rare of recording, editing, and releasing a trailer as a standalone thing,
Hmm.
which was already rare back then, but is virtually unheard of now. I always loved stuff like that, of like just not taking scenes and shots from the movie itself, but creating something itself to be like a taste of what's coming up. But the going in blind to Inscription is and you're relatively safe looking up anything, I think, because
Hmm.
all the marketing materials was I don't want to say anything because even that's like potentially spoil. It's one of those games that is like
It's just
difficult.
one of those games. Sorry.
Yes, when you just don't want to boot up. But the what is it that old standby? Simple to learn, difficult to master. It's
Ah,
one of those games.
okay.
It's a card game, but then like it's also
Oh, you've talked about this.
oh yeah, almost certainly. It's a card game. It's also an escape room game, and then
Yeah.
it's also so much more than that. Um, but yeah, if you get a wild hair and decide to play it, it's not very intensive, but it is. It's tough. It's difficult. What I've been playing off stream is another card based, simple to learn, difficult to master game called Balatro. And the only reason is because it's on Apple Arcade. And I'm one of the 5 people who has an Apple Arcade subscription. And I enjoy it very much. It is a very interesting game in that it's one of the most basic games I think I've ever played. And I want to say it's developed by a single person. And it's literally poker,
No.
but it's not poker at all.
Okay.
It's like the scoring is based on poker, but then it's insanity. It's not poker at all. So like for example, if you want to play I'm getting ahead of myself here. Every round is scoring chips, and it's just you got to reach that score.
Hmm.
That's all you have to do. And there's no opponent. You just got to get the score by playing a hand. And while in real poker you might play um if I play a pair of twos,
Hmm.
this is a bad example. If I play a pair of jacks,
Hmm.
that's a pair
Hmm.
in poker. If I play a pair of queens, that's also a pair, but it's a
But it
step
beats
higher.
Jack. Yeah.
So if my opponent plays 2 jacks and I play 2 queens, I win.
Hmm.
Balatro doesn't care about that.
Oh.
It is face cards are worth 10 points, 10 chips. So if you play a
Oh.
pair of jacks, it's 20 because they're each 10. You play 2 queens, same thing.
Hmm.
So your goal is just to get the right number of chips. You can collect up to 5 Joker cards that can give you more chips, multiply your chips, or give you money. And that's it. Every set of rounds, there's 3 rounds per set. I'm not using their nomenclature because it's kind of confusing if you don't look at it. Each round is I can't remember. Each 3 rounds is an ante, and there's always 8 antes per game. And then there's 3 rounds per ante. The third round of every ante has a special challenge. So maybe diamonds can't earn chips, for example. Um, or the one that I've died to the most, you can only play 1 hand this round.
Oh.
And if you don't get the chips, game over. It's over. Yeah, you're done. Uh, but then also, you can level up your hands. So like a pair is like you get 20 chips total, regardless of what's on the cards, multiplied by 2, something like that. So like, and then when you play the cards, then the value of the pair is added to your total chips, and then those are multiplied by the multiplier, and then that's how many chips you get. You can level up a pair to be, oh well, actually now it's 30 chips and 3 times or a multiplier of 3. So you can level up your hands in poker every time you play, but it's technically a roguelike. Even though that tends to mean like the layout is different in a roguelike, like the map is different. There's no map. It's just you lose all of that stuff if you die, all those level ups, and then you get a different set of cards, booster packs, jokers, everything, every time you play. And I played it and I was like, oh, this game's all right. And that was what, 3 days ago? And I don't want to look at the amount of time I've put into it.
Okay.
Since then. It's probably 10 hours
Mm.
of me sitting there with my iPad, like, okay, now if I play this, I'll get this many chips. And then I'm in the shop and I'm like, okay, but wait, if I buy this Joker, I'll have to get rid of this Joker because that doesn't help me at all. Like one is like, oh, there's tarot cards too. There's planet cards. There's like,
This sounds like a nightmare to me. I'm going to be honest with you.
It's good. As I said, it's easy to learn, difficult to master, and sometimes you're like, why did I even do that? Like, why did I know that was a bad idea, and now the run is over. I don't know where it goes replay wise because I beat it once. I beat 8 antes, and when you do that, it's like, oh, do you want to just keep going? Yeah, sure. But I failed because guess what? The next boss round was play one hand, and I had some things that if I discarded stuff, I lost multipliers, so I didn't discard any cards from my hand. I should have. It's insane. Game of the Year contender last year at the Game Awards.
Wow.
It is so interesting and weird that it was nominated for Game of the Year last year. Along with the DLC to Elden Ring, which, I mean, I love Elden Ring, but come on.
Mm-hmm.
And what game won? What won Game of the Year last year was Astrobot, which is one of the best games I've ever played in my life.
Nice.
Have you played Astrobot?
Nope.
Do you have a PS5?
Yep.
Play Astrobot.
Okay.
Play Astro's Playroom because it's free on PS5. And then if you like Astro's Playroom, buy Astrobot. So
for the next month, people can mostly expect you to be finishing Alan Wake 2 and working through the Dark Souls games?
On stream, optimistically, yes.
Yes. Okay.
And if nothing else, I'll be talking about what I'm playing off stream, which who knows what that'll be.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I have to call it. So I never know how to end this. I've just been cutting to black and playing the music.
Oh, wait. And I want, you can cut to black right there.
Yeah. Okay.